Aloha and welcome everyone. This is our Ashtanga Yoga Bali Conference 5th workshop featuring Darby and Joanne. Present Darby and Joanne.
So thank you. First, I just want to thank Prem for inviting me to this beautiful island. And it's so good to be around Mount Dew, David, Danny. It was a pleasure to meet Danny. So it's very good, very good. And Radha, it was nice to meet you also. And I'm with my lovely soulmate.
Annie.
Oh, Annie Pace, yes. See, I'm so nervous. I haven't been this nervous for I don't know how long. I kind of feel, I was just reflecting just for a few moments, I feel like Arjuna, just going into battle, and he asks to go in to see the enemy, and he just freaks out. And so I'm just getting consoled that Krishna's there to help him. So looking at it that way.
We're not the enemy. We're not the enemy.
Not the enemy, I know, but the enemy is inside, so that's what's churning away. My name's Darby, this is Joanne, and Guruji used to call us Darby Joan. He's always Darby Joan. And, you know, we disappeared from the Ashtanga scene for quite a while, but he kept talking about us. And finally we turned up, and we started to meet some of the Ashtangis, Eddie Stern and people like that. And I remember reading Eddie, and he looked at us and said, "There's two of you?" So where we come from. So it's been one of those things we've been together for so long in the Ashtanga that we just, that's the way we are. We were just, a lot of things we have are just the same, and I'm very thankful for it. So it started, as I said, in 1974 when I went to India. As I said, I was on my way to Europe, but I ended up in India. And I remember going there being very, very scared. I was flying into Calcutta, and I'd heard all these stories about India. And so I arrived, and it wasn't as bad as all that, but there was a few things that freaked me out. I remember the first thing that really, for my real first memory after the airport, was walking down the streets of Calcutta and just seeing a guy sitting. Around him was just diarrhea and flies, just flies and flies. And I knew he was on his way to die. And people were just walking around him as if nothing was wrong. So India is like that. It has these things that just bring you back into a reality, bring you into a check, that take you away from what you're used to living in the Western world. You're just there and you see life as it really is. It's a struggle. And, you know, people in the West don't know how lucky they are. After they, you know, when you see this, you think to these people in the West, what are you worried about? You know, so that was my first experience, and but other things were so good. Like the first thing I felt was it was religion here, not religion but spirituality, and that's what really got to me. It's something as I mentioned the other night, that I'd forgotten, spirituality, and I really wanted to. It just came back, and you know, it's bhakti. It's there. It comes in from your heart, and you just feel it. And I don't know what it is. I don't know who I'm looking for, but there's somebody out there for sure. And so I think it was 6 months in India, doing the traveler's thing. I wasn't into yoga. I didn't even know about yoga. Didn't know about yoga for many, many years. Even when I met Patanjali Joyce, I really didn't know what yoga was. And, you know, I was just doing the traveling thing. As I said, you go to India for spirituality or drugs. And I went there to have fun and check it out. So I eventually was heading towards England, never made it to Africa instead. Finally ran out of money after 3 years. Not bad. When I think about it, I had $3,000. So $3,000, 3 years later I had to write back home, as I did many, many times, write back home and ask for money to get home. I just go to the end. So went back, but had this memory of India and wanted to go back. And so the excuse to go back was to do yoga. So I'd met this girl from New Zealand, and we were together, and we decided, I talked her into it. Let's go. We want to go to England again. I was going to try and make it to England. Again, we were going to go overland. So I think we flew this time into Singapore. And the first thing that happened to them was they freaked out. They couldn't squat on a toilet. They couldn't understand squatting on a toilet. They couldn't understand going to an Indian restaurant and eating with your fingers. They just couldn't fathom it. So we ended up in Bangkok, and we were then getting ready to buy our tickets to go to India, because Bangkok then was the place to buy the tickets and you get cheap flights. And she decided she wasn't going to go. So I wasn't going to miss out. So I said goodbye to her, knowing that that was going to be the last time I'd be with her. For the reason that I had this understanding and this kind of lifestyle of understanding India that she was never going to get, and there would be that difference between us for the rest of our lives. So I knew it wasn't going to work. So I really said goodbye. And then I went to India. And this is around about April. So as I mentioned, I wanted to go to Goa. So I was still a traveller at heart. And I wanted to do this thing in Goa, which I've been hearing about for years. Every traveller talked about Goa. Goa was the place. You have to go to Goa at Christmas, the parties, just the fun that's there, the freedom, the naked, everybody's naked. So, which is kind of like a young guy, well, naked women, yes. But it's amazing how that is. I remember being in one of the beaches just past Arambur. It was called Clearwater Lake. And it's not like it is today. There was just a few hippies camped out around the river. Wherever you could find a place, you camped out. There was no shops on the way. There was only one shop or two shops in Arambur. And so we'd walk in the morning, get breakfast, buy provisions for the day. And as I said, everybody was naked. And I remember this one girl, I used to see her in the morning. Every morning I'd see her, she was naked. And it was like, hi, great, good. Then came news.
Me.
No, it wasn't her. It was New Year's Eve. And there was a New Year's Eve party. I'd seen her naked for a couple of months, a couple of months. No, a month. And nothing about it. New Year's Eve, she's wearing a G-string and a little top. God, she was hot like crazy. You could see her naked and nothing happened. As soon as you put a little bit on, it's amazing what happens. So she was already with a boyfriend anyway. So finally the parties are over. I've done my thing, and I've decided from the time I'm there that I'm there, and I'm starting to talk to people, and I hear about this place Gokana, which is in the north of Karnataka, a very, very holy Shiva town, a very spiritual town for Shiva. And Shiva has been my god. He's my god of choice now. You know, stories I hear about him, and it's all the chillums going around, boom, Shiva, boom. So all that was there, and it's all the songs, all the chanting we were doing were about, the ones that worked for me were the ones to do with Shiva. So I decided that I was going to walk there, because this is what pilgrims do. Pilgrims walk everywhere to these festivals. They don't take cars, and that's the time they were walking. So I decided to walk. So I basically walked the whole coast of Goa to get there. And at the beginning it was a bit strange, because I decided that I'm going to take the whole coast. So if there was a cliff, I'd go around it. I didn't go over the top. And I remember one day I'm going around and I couldn't see the end, and it's coming down the sunset. And I'm hanging on cliffs, like rock climbing around these cliffs. And just before sunset, I come around with these ladies pulling up muscles and say, phew. So then I followed them. And what I did was just walked wherever I landed, wherever I was at sunset, that's where I would stay. And I would buy food at lunchtime, cook it, and then sleep. Next morning I'd get up, start walking, find a place for breakfast, continue walking, go to lunchtime, find something to eat and buy provisions, take a nap, and then continue my walking. Nobody wanted to come with me. A few people, I asked them and they said, no. So I was doing this alone. And if I liked the place, I'd stay a couple of days. So I was very much alone, and again, my companion here is Shiva. So I'm talking to Shiva, praying to Shiva on this whole trip. And finally I come to Gokana, and there's a few Westerners there. In fact, I don't stay in Gokana. I went to the next beach, and there's nobody there. There's a couple of guys living in houses, but they didn't want to have anybody coming in. So I just did what I did every night. I just found some running water, set up my bedroll, and that's where I stayed. Went into town, buy food, and basically lived there on this beautiful beach of Kudli Beach. It's very beautiful. Very different then to what it is now. It's still beautiful, but then there was nobody. The other thing that was happening was that I left everything I owned, pretty much everything of importance, my passport, most of my money I left in Mysore. And so at this stage I'm starting to run out of money, down to my last few rupees, but I'm not going to leave. Finally Shivaratri arrives, and now hundreds of thousands and thousands of people are coming. Indians are coming, Westerners a few Westerners are starting to come. And Shivaratri comes and I get as high as I can on the day of Shivaratri, because now we're allowed to go in and touch this lingam. It's one day a year where anybody can go in and touch the lingam of Shiva. So it's in this inner confines of a temple. And so I get in with everybody else in this crowd of people, and it's so crowded. At one stage, I lift my feet off the ground and just carried in with the crowd. So it's that crowded. And finally I get in there and it's like, they just let a bunch of people in. I didn't know this at the time. Finally I'm in here with all these people, and I'm getting it, I'm the lingam and all these people in front of me. I get on the ground, I'm laying there, reaching in. Finally, my priest taps me and I look up and I'm the only one in the room. And then I come out, and as I said, I think I was down to about my last 3 rupees. And I come out and I'm walking in the street just so high from being in this place. And this guy runs up to where I met earlier in Goa. And he says he's going to Mysore. So suddenly, here I am, and this guy's got money. He's not going to give it to me, but he's going to lend me money. And so we go to Mysore. And in fact, we hitchhiked to Mysore, so it was pretty interesting. And that was another thing that just showed my belief. Hitchhiking in India, and we came to one place, and the road showed 2 directions, going up this way and going around this way. But the lift was going this way. We didn't say, oh, it's going to go to where we want to go, we'll take it. It was going through the mountains. So it was going up these mountains, and it only took us to the top. And so we're up there and we stop in this village, and they'd never seen a white person before. Suddenly we're Rama and Lakshmana. All these people, kids running up to us. Oh, it's Rama, Rama. So it was pretty neat. We weren't Rama, but it was neat. And then we go through and we're walking, and now we're waiting for a lift. But no cars are coming. Nothing's coming at all. So we're walking, and it's getting close to sunset, and it's in the hills, so it's starting to get cold. And the guy I'm traveling with is starting to freak out a bit, and I said, okay, so let's keep going, we couldn't do anything else. And then we came around, and there's a statue of Shiva. And I just paid homage to Shiva, and then I told this guy, I said, we're going to get a lift. And as soon as they'd said that, this bus came along, and came along and just stopped, and we weren't going to pay. We didn't pay for the bus. They let us in, and they took us to the next town. And then another, incredible thing happened. And this is, again, my fantasy. As we say, we have these dialogues with the universe, or dialogues, and Shiva's my universe. So we're in this town, and we've eaten, and we're looking for a prasad, not a prasad, a dessert that they have in Goa. It's just semolina and jaggery and some raisins put in, and maybe a cashew nut. I can't remember what they call it, but it's a very famous dessert that they have in Goa. And I'd been eating this and making it, cooking it myself for the last couple of months. And they didn't have it in this town. We're looking everywhere. So we just wandered, we found this, and then there's this temple. And there's a huge Nandi in front, and they come in there, bow, and go into the temple and pay homage. And then this guy dressed in orange comes over and, okay, come have some prasad. So we go in, and there's this lovely dessert that I've been looking for. So again, it doesn't sound very big, but at the time this was like, oh my God, Shiva. So, and I'm just making this point because this is a dialogue we can have with the universe and answers. And if you're willing and ready to be open for it and find the answers, just pick up on this vibe. So wonderful. So finally we're heading into Mysore, and now I am. I'm ready. I'm coming to Mysore, I'm coming to my possessions. Now I'm ready to do yoga. I'm looking for a place. I think we went past the Ramakrishna ashram, but I'm still looking. I wonder if I do yoga in there. I wonder if I can find a yoga teacher. I'm coming in, I go to the hotel, and one of the first people I meet is this guy we call Old Cliff Barber. So Old Cliff's staying in the same hotel. It's on the roof. It's like it was one of the higher buildings there. It was like 4 stories high at that time. And we're just living on the roof there. These like 6 or 8 rooms. The bathrooms for community downstairs. But there was a Cliff, and there was a German guy as well, another German guy who was practicing with Patanjali Joyce, and me. And so I talked to Cliff, saying I'm interested in yoga. He said, come and meet my teacher. So I said, okay. So we went in at that time I were practicing in the afternoon, so we went in at the afternoon and I met Patanjali Joyce and he said, sit down, watch. So I watched. I don't even know what I saw. I haven't got any memory of what was happening as I watched. I just had faith that I'd been asking to do yoga and this was where I was led. This was the direction. This was the teacher. I said, where's my teacher? And this is the one that turned up. So it didn't really matter who it was. I was determined to do yoga, except it had to be at the right price. So, of course, the question was, how much was it? And $100 was ridiculous for me. And I said 70, as I said the other day, I said 75, and he said, no. And I said, as any good bargain would say, no. Thank you, Baba. And I went away. But something drew me back. You know, I guess it was this thing that it didn't really matter. I was led there, and that was going to be, no matter what it was, I was going to do yoga there. And an important point about this is also that I reflect on this and look at it, the first sutra of Patanjali. Are you ready? Now are you ready for yoga? And then he expounds the doctrine of yoga. And this was the stage. This is why I didn't do yoga before. This is why I waited to this moment, because I wasn't ready. I still wanted to do things and get these seeds out of my system so I could concentrate and get passively or passionately into yoga. So this was there. This was ready. I was ready to do it. And so I went back, saw Patanjali and said, okay. And I told you the story. I said, I'll do it. And he said, okay, for 75. So he waved the 25. And then he said, start. And of course, I didn't have any underwear. I was just in a longi. And no, not today. I'll come back tomorrow. So I watched the class again. And the next day I came back and just did it. 5 Saraya Namaskara, 3B, Padangushtasana, Padahastasana, Trikonasana, Parshvakonasana, and then this finishing sequence. And that was it. Came back the next day, he added another posture. And then he called me, and this was the Friday, he called me in on the Saturday, came in the Saturday morning, did the same thing, added one more posture. And during that week, he basically added a posture a day. And all I remember is, I don't know how many postures I got, it wasn't that many. But I just remember the following Saturday, I was so sore. It was unbelievable. And for the next 3 months, I was in constant pain. Constant. It just shifted. It went from one leg to the other leg to somewhere else, somewhere else. So at least it was moving. And when I mentioned this to Cliff, he said, it's normal. We all go through this. This is normal. It's just breakthroughs. Yes, just breakthroughs. It was just, a lot of it, it wasn't the pushing. It was just my body and trying too hard. And of course, Guruji's assistance. But there's a funny thing about this assistance, the way Guruji works. He comes in and he'll put you into a posture. And what happens to you is that the first time he puts you into a posture, you have no idea what's going to happen. You just give in and he just pushes you down. He knows that. He knows you can go there. But the next day when you come back, there's a memory. And the memory is saying, no. No, that wasn't good. And the body resists and it tightens up. Guruji knows he can get you. He puts you there again. And he puts you there. And it takes about 2 to 3 weeks. and then the body gives up, and wherever he'd pushed you, that's where you would go. So in this madness of his adjustments, it worked, because you just improved and got your flexibility so quickly. So it was pretty amazing, and everybody who was there went through it, and everybody who subsequently came were telling the same stories. They all came for 3 months of agony. You know, Prem came, 3 months of agony. They all came in for it. So it was just part of that. Of course, we weren't doing anything else. All we did was practice yoga, go home, and as it got more and more, we did more and more yoga. It was just practice, go home, have a second shavasana, eat, have a third shavasana, go out shopping, come back, have a fourth shavasana, and just basically prepare yourself to do yoga the next day. And then Friday was a big day. Hey, no yoga tomorrow, let's go to a movie. So that was basically our life, you know, unless there was we were lucky and a full moon and a Saturday came on a full moon came on a Friday and the Saturday off, we had 2 days off, we could go for a tour. We could go down to one of the wildlife sanctuaries or something. So this is the beginnings of how I got into it. It was my journey into finding Patabi Joyce. And it was it was a turning point of my life. From there on, my life changed, and changed for nothing but the better. Okay.
And don't forget the motto, no pain, no gain. That was the
That was the motto.
main motto in Mysore in those days, and we just accepted that at that time. So my story is that I left also home in 1976, as I mentioned last few days ago, and I just wanted to travel. I just had enough of the studies and all the work, and so I left my family, everything, my friends behind, and I decided to arrive in Paris. So for about 2 years, I did non-stop traveler's life, which is, you know, in those days was really good because you could travel, and it was like, as much as the Ashtanga family is a family, the traveler's family in those years was similar. You would meet people in one place and meet them later on somewhere else, and it kept on. We all kind of moved in the same area and gave us each other tips. Go there, visit this, go there. So it was quite an interesting time. So I went through Europe, I went through Africa, Israel, arrived in Pakistan with some people, and then went to India. When I went to Varanasi, I said, this country is insane. I could never believe, like, seeing all those sadhus and all those unbelievable people, you know, it was just, for me, it was too much. So I just said, this is insane. So I went to Nepal, did some trekking, came back and visited India again, then went to Sri Lanka, Thailand, the whole traveler's tour, hippie tour, let's say. So when I arrived, in fact, it's Bali. About a couple of years later, I arrived here and take all the restaurants off Ubud and take all the shops from Ubud and put back the rice paddies and the coconut trees and leave the temples around here, and it was just paradise. I've never seen anything so beautiful. So of course I've stayed here a couple of months, and that changed my whole spirit because people here are so spiritual. You know, the rice fields, they have goddess. For the rice field, they have gods. For the rain, they have. It was just everywhere. Wherever you walk, there was some gods, and they would make puja and ceremonies almost every night of the month. So I just was following all this and starting to read about all these gods and goddesses and the spirituality of life, and suddenly I realized, you know, I'm Catholic, so Catholic, there's a big dude up there, and you talk to him when in big trouble, and you say, oh, can you help me now? But it's not kind of part of your life like they have here. So they kind of started to read more about it, and then I ended up with reading Herman's book, which is called Siddhartha. It's basically the life of Buddha. And wow, that really opened my eyes, and I said, okay, that's it. I'm going back to Dharamsala, because I'd been there and I saw those monks, and I was kind of find them real sweet and kind of interesting. So I said, and there was a course going on, like a 3-month course with some Rinpoche. So I decided to go and study with them in a little monastery. And it was interesting because a year before I was down in the lower part of Dharamsala, which is where all the travelers are, and they, you know, the fun and everything. And a year later, I'm up there in the clouds with the monks, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. But it was very interesting to learn all this. And one night, I was reading about death, and suddenly my room started to shake at the same moment, and it was a very major earthquake, I think 7.5, I think. And there was many people who died that night, and I'm like, wow, this is like my third eye open. And it's like, oof, you never know in life what happens. You can be alive and next minute you're dead. So that kind of got me more and more into the spiritual aspect of the practice. And again, as I mentioned the other day, I saw somebody doing some practice, yoga practice on a roof somewhere, and I asked him where he learned that from, and he said, oh, I learned that from Vitananda in Pondicherry. And he says, oh, you can go there and take a 6-month course and learn all about the Shatkarma and the pranayama and all this yogic stuff. And I'm like, that's 6 months, that's a long time. And I had other friends that were leaving to go to Ladakh, and they wanted me to join them and enjoy back on the traveler's road. And I'm like, what do I do? And I could not make up my mind. And there was an oracle guy, and I'm like, okay, he can decide for me. I don't want to decide. So I go and see him, and he was almost like, he was very old and like floating on his bed. He was not quite human almost. So shake his things, and then he answers the translator to give me the answer, and he says, do whatever you want. And I'm like, oh, how can I decide? You know, and they were leaving in a couple of days, and I could not. Then I thought of it, you know, the boga is enjoyment. It's like, okay, that's fun, but what is that going to bring me in the future? As yoga, like they say in the Gita, and they say that yoga is like poison at the beginning, but at the end it's like nectar. So at that time I sort of tried to forget the boga world, so I decided to go to Pondicherry. And Bhikkhitananda, he was like 140 kilo, I think 300 pounds. You know, anyway, he was enormous. And the first thing he told me was, 8 days of fasting when you come, because my date of birth. I'm like, wow, this is intense. So I had to go through all this cleansing and then the water fast and for, you know, I was playing I Ching. You know I Ching, the Chinese thing you throw to find out the future of where to decide. And every day I was like hoping he would tell me to get out of there, but no, he kept telling me stay there, stay there. So I ended up staying there for this famous 6 months, and Vishwanath came over. That was Guruji's nephew, to do a demonstration. And I didn't, you know, we had, by then I had my little Hatha Yoga routine, and I had all those cleansing and small pranayama thing. And and at the end, when we left, somebody told me, please bring my motorbike to Bangalore if you know how to drive a motorbike. And a little scooter, it was a scooter. I said, fine, I love scooters. So I drove with him. He was too scared. He was like 60-year-old Indian, Malaysian man. And he said, you drive, I'm too afraid to drive. So we drove through from Pondicherry to Bangalore and ended up going to see Vishwanath at the end. And after a week, Vishwanath said, okay, why don't you go and meet my uncle? So that's when I arrived in Mysore with the scooter and the old Malaysian. And And Guruji said, okay, you come and visit, come and see the class tomorrow. It was in the afternoon in those days. So I went to see, and I don't know it. I just went gaga, like, I don't know. I had to learn this thing. I didn't know what it was. And it was, you know, as I said, Darby was there, and Old Cliff was there, and the French couple. And again, my money was in Mumbai. And I told that to Guruji, and he says, oh, no problem. The French couple have the money, have some money.
English and French.
Huh?
An English guy and a French woman.
Yeah, whatever. And so they end up giving me some money, and he says they're leaving in a week or two, so you can take their house, which was right behind Guruji's shal house. So that was, wow, quite handy. And so that's how I started. And for me, it was different to Darby because everything was, I had been fasting and cleansing and all, and doing some hatha yoga, so my body was open and I was flexible, so there was no problem for me to learn one posture after another. So after 3 months, I'd complete, like Darby, the primary series. And basically after, gradually every day, we used to learn a new posture. And even the same thing with intermediate. When he left after 3 months, I started intermediate, and Darby was really, when you came back, he was, oh, I want to learn that too. So
we were like a rabbit in the hare.
Yeah, I was
so I was a rabbit, and then a tortoise.
Me, I was a
tortoise.
I was a turtle, yeah.
Turtle. She just plodded along, plodded. So we always ended up at the same spot.
Yeah. So we ended up being basically it was 6 months. I think intermediate was a program of
Program
months.
was 2 months. We learned
2
it in
months
2 months.
only.
We learned intermediate.
So after intermediate, advanced postures started. But in between, Darby, when you left the first time, he was came back after a couple months or a month.
No, it was a month.
A month, and he told Guruji, "Oh, Guruji, do you have a better place to stay?" Because he was living far in town, but it was far to walk for him.
And it was dirty, and so I wanted to find a place closer to Charlotte, maybe with a family, and so it would be a little bit cheaper, not that it was that expensive, but just to be closer in that area, and something a little cheaper.
And then next day, he asked the evening this thing, and the next day Guruji comes to me and says, "Darby, good man." I said, yes, we were friends, you know, we were often eating together, and he used to go and cook on the top of his horrible place. It was like horrible hotel, with the toilet downstairs, and I was living in that nice room, big room with the kitchen in the back and bathroom. And so he says, "Darby, no money." And I'm like, oh no, don't tell me I've got to give him money again.
Well, not again, you'd never give me money.
Never, some money. And no, Darby needs a home. Home? Yes, he can stay with you. I'm like, it's only no bedrooms. There's only one big room with no beds.
It was a big room. But
it was
only
a
one,
big
it was only
room, but
one
it was
room
still
and then a
only
kitchen.
one room.
Bathroom
Yes.
was outdoors.
So, anybody else would have asked me that, I would have probably said no, but it was Guruji, so of course, Guruji, if you think it's a good idea, okay, Darby can stay. So Darby ended up in my house, and then...
Which became our house.
Our house.
Which we shared with a couple of other people later
because
on.
some French would arrive sometimes, and Darby Guruji knew that I could speak French, so he would say, "Oh, go and stay with Joan. You know, she has more place in her house, you know." So there was end up sometimes 3 and 4 in our...
We ended up with 3 French women and me.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
Yeah.
But, and I would get all this shit because Darby used to like smoking, and I didn't smoke at that time, and Guruji would come to me, "Smoking very bad for you," but he never told him you anything. So, so it was all these things happening. So I was progressing more and more and more in advance.
Tell them how much he charged you.
$100.
100 rupees.
Oh, for the house,
For the
yes,
house,
100
100
rupee.
rupees.
Yes.
And then I moved in thinking, oh, okay, we'll split the cost. No, 100 rupees for me also.
And when the French came, and 100 rupee for them also.
So we never split the house.
Yeah, so yes, at that time also, that was the interesting part for me, that the famous headstand I want to talk about, because that was a very regular thing and very tricky thing from Guruji. It was not something that I intended on doing, but he sort of worked me into staying longer on my head, because I used to do the headstand, but had no strength. I was very kind of weak. So he would come at the end and pull me up and pull my feet up, so that way I was building strength to lift up from my head. And at the beginning, like everybody else, 5 breaths, then eventually 10 breaths, then 1 minute, then 2 minutes, and after maybe a month, 5 minutes, then another month it was like 7, but gradually that I didn't even feel about the increasing of time. So maybe it took, 6 months or something. I ended up with half an hour. And every day was the same routine, half an hour. It didn't matter how many postures I would do, it was always a half-hour thing. And one day, some American guy called, and there was so much commotion. I just started my headstand, kind of halfway through my headstand, and Guruji went in. There was so much excitement. They were going to Hawaii, and I could hear things going on.
It was Bhavani who called.
Maybe Bhavani, I don't know, and there's so much talking. I'm like, how long have I been here? I don't know, but I wouldn't go down because
She's stubborn.
I'm stubborn, but also I didn't want to make him feel as if I gave up, so I just stayed there and stayed. And after a while, finally the door opened and Guruji says, "Oh, 1 hour. Oh, good, Joan. Every day from now on you do 1 hour." So that was it, and it stayed there until I left in 1984. I did 1 hour a day, every day, for so many years.
Okay, so as Joanne was saying, the program then was 3 months. And everybody who went to Mysore, nobody went for a month. It was a 3-month program. Like when Prem came, he stayed 3 months. And as a beginner you came in, you hadn't done yoga, in 3 months, no matter who it was, you learnt primary series. And Guruji would just put you into the postures. But if you couldn't do them, he was the prop. He was it. We can't do it, put you in. And another thing about it was you never did a posture that he was helping you in. If he was going to assist you in a posture, you never did it until he assisted you, especially in the advanced series. So if you did it, he'd make you do it again anyway. So, and there wasn't that many people, so you never really had to wait a long time. So the 3-month program happened, and as I said, I was just in agony. As I said, it switched. I remember one time Joanne, I asked her to give me a massage and on the back of my legs, which were black and blue. And she came along and went, and I just jumped. I couldn't even be touched on my legs. And so that first 3 months was like that. And then I took a holiday for just over a month and I actually went to Pondicherry, ended up going to Hampi, and then a little touring, and then I came back again and ready for the next few months. So I committed again to another 3 months. And that's when I approached Guruji about somewhere to stay, and he hooked me up with Joanne. Little did he know what was going to happen. Man, woman, same room. What's going to happen?
The devil comes in.
So, and here I am, I'm healed. I can do everything. Everything he's done, I'm doing. There's no pain. It's just wonderful. Then, 3rd day, Sutra Neti, boom, my chest pops out, big bang, and it was so scary, this noise. And I go, oh no, here we go again. And luckily it only lasted 3 days. So the next while there was still pain, but it was never the same intense pain as what I went through in primary. You know, and I went through pain for the next until 84, but it was always it wasn't that same kind of pain. It was more just a soreness, except for my knee. Now, how I wrecked my knee, well, I say it's wrecked, and pretty much it is again my own ego. Here I am, and this is in the first 3 months. I'm practicing, and I'm learning Janu Shirshasana C. So I'm doing the move, which you shouldn't do. You shouldn't come in like this and twist around. But I was doing this, putting my leg down, doing the posture, looking over at my mentor, who I've taken as my mentor, Old Cliff. And he's doing 3rd series, or I don't know what series it was then, and he's taking his foot into Varinciasana. So he's taking it way over like this and sitting on it. And I'm looking, here I am, 5 weeks, 6 weeks into the practice, wanting to do that. So every time I come out of Janu Shirshasana, I come up and I go, push over. And in a couple of weeks, my foot went over. Here I am, yes. Old Cliff, I can do that. And a few months later, or a little while, it wasn't a few months, it was a few months because I'd already been on my vacation, came back the second time. That's when my knee popped out. It just pluck. And for the next 3 days, I'm practicing. Every time I came into Marichiyasana D, my knee would go clunk. And I wasn't going to back down. You know, this was Guruji standing there. I'm not going to say I'm sore. I'm just going to go through it. And no matter what happens, clunk, clunk. And then finally the 3rd day, Guruji said, no more, no more. And this was just before you came. And so then I'm regulated to doing postures, and he said, no more knee bending. So I didn't do anything to do with the bending of the knee. So I'm doing Paschimottanasana and not even Janu Shirshasana, nothing like that, except for Baddha Konasana, which I should talk about again. I should go back to that posture Baddha Konasana. And so I will. I remember, so we're learning with Guruji, and I know Baddha Konasana is coming. So you know the next posture. And this is the posture that's in the room with everybody. The screams. This is where the most noise of all the heavy breathing starts in this posture, this heavy breathing and this or no breath. And so I know it's coming. And so every night, as we're cooking, we're on this roof, as Joanne said, we cooked. Every night I'm doing this and doing this, and it's going down. And then 2 days before Guruji gives me the posture, my knee's down. Oh, and I come back the next day and it's like, oh yes, here we are. So here we come, Guruji says, oh, and I see him coming to give me posture, a big smile on my face. Ah, yes. See, Guruji? And then he just goes, boom, and pushes me straight down to the ground, which is like, wow, what happened here? So the next day, as I told you, what happens the next day? My body remembered, and here I go, and Guruji goes, and I'll go down. Come up and he's, oh, Darby, you choo-choo train? And then the next few weeks again, that was another one of them, just going through that posture for a few weeks. So this was the only posture he did. And here I am with this knee, and he'd come along and he'd just stand and go, plump, this leg would go down. And when he would stand on this one, he'd go, plump, and my spine would go, and then I think that was my 3rd month. So at the end of the month, I'm getting ready to leave, and Guruji said, stay 1 more month. He didn't want me to go unless my knee had healed. My knee had healed, so I stayed another month, and it still wasn't healed. So he said, "Stay 1 more month," and then it was gradually getting better. So I started to do Janu Shirshasanas, and I was starting to finally got into half lotus. And then I remember one day it was so beautiful that I got there, and I went, and this was the first day after like 3 months. So I put my leg in Padmasana. And Guruji in the front room, and he just went, looked at me, bowed his head, said thank you. It was really sweet that he had taken that concern. He was so happy that I'd start doing things again. So, and I remember you were there, that's when you came. And this is the toughness of Guruji also, is that he went to get his visas. He was going to go again to America. And they went to Chennai to get the visas, and he was supposed to go for a couple of days. And so the first day, I remember we're all in the room, we were all practicing. And the next morning, my knee was still sore, and I just said, I'm just going to take the day off. So, you know, Guruji wasn't coming, so it was no big deal. I'll just sleep in today. Unfortunately, Guruji came. And the next thing I know, Joanne's running home and saying, Guruji said come. You come. So I wasn't even allowed to have a day off. That was his concern. He wanted you to be there all the time. If you weren't there, he was concerned he would send someone to go and get me. Didn't let me sleep in. It's pretty wild. So.
Yeah, and for me, that's it. I was doing so well, like doing primary, intermediate, advanced postures. I was like flying high, and then catastrophe stroke. My dear friend here got me pregnant.
Told you, man, woman.
So it was sheer, I mean, I think you left shortly after, and I remember my first month I was late, and I'm like, what's happening here? So I went to, there was a Shiva temple in town, and I'm like, oh Shiva, please, 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 you cannot do that to me. I'm just on top, and I'm in heaven learning all these new postures and this new lifestyle and all this. And next morning, I lose some blood. So I'm like, phew, I'm okay, I'm done. I even tell Guruji I've got my period. So he says, 3 days off, don't come and see me for 3 days. In fact, that's a big subject about the woman with menstruation, but I'll go after. And the next month, nothing happens, no period. I said, oh, that's it, I'm doing too much. I'm becoming an athlete without periods. Darby hadn't come back anyway since then. And third month, again, no period. And I said, oh, yeah, I'm definitely doing too much yoga. This is stopping my periods from coming.
She was taking castor oil because she thought she was constipated.
No, but the last, because I had a lump there somehow. And so it, and then Darby, when he came back from his trip, said, let's go to the hospital. This is not normal. So I go, and then they tell me, you're 4 months pregnant. And I'm like, oh, 4 months pregnant. I didn't even know it, basically. I think I was
too late.
Too late. So next morning we take a meeting with Guruji, and I told him, I said, Guruji, I think I'm pregnant. And he says, who's the father? I said, Darby. He says, then you marry. And I'm like, marry? Yes, you marry. And he took out his calendar and picked a date very quickly, like within a few weeks or a month.
It was within a few, pretty.
Just time for us to get organized, buying himself a nice longi and me a nice sari. And this is the chain, because in India they don't give a ring, you just wear a kind of a chain in the neck.
There's the little thing on the end of a chain.
Yeah, so, and so he did himself the marriage ceremony. It was quite very small, but very nice. It was a little fire ceremony in his living room upstairs.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
So there was only Saraswati, Amma, and Sally Walker was there, and Guruji, after turning the 7 times, he looks at me in the eyes and he says, Joan, you will never leave this man again, and never leave this man. And I'm like, oh, all my fear came to me, because my parents didn't have a very good marriage, and I'm like, she always told me, you have to be independent, you have to make sure you have a good job in life so you don't depend on a man. So for me, marriage was the worst I could imagine. I mean, postures of asanas, nothing, but marriage was like evil for me. So I could not answer. I was like, And then he looks at me even with sharper eyes. Joan, you say yes that you will never leave this man. And then I went in an alpha zone. I could not even, how can I say yes to something I cannot be sure of, especially to Guruji? I said I could not answer. Then the third time he says, if you don't answer, I cancel the marriage. And he made me repeat after him, you will never leave this man after you marry. And I said, yes, Guruji, I will never leave this man after marriage.
And he asked me, and I just said, yeah.
Of course. He didn't want to go through this. And it's been my mantra every morning and night before I go to bed, you know.
I didn't know that. How to make a marriage last.
So this, so of course, the pregnancy started, the belly started to bigger and bigger, and at one stage, Guruji still wanted me to do Dvipada Shirshasana, and it was getting tough. And I still remember Amma in the door. You saw her too.
Amma came in.
And she saw me because probably my face was like, and Guruji was, and she was like, and well, true enough, one of my ribs popped out. So I could not breathe for I think 3 days because it was so painful. So after that, Guruji was very careful. He took out a lot of postures. He ended up giving me a lot of meditation postures, sideway posture. But he loved to make me do back bendings. I was like, wow, because when you're pregnant, you're more open. So all the back bending, the Kapotasana, the scorpion, I flat on my head, and he was helping me to put my, even 9 months pregnant, I was 2 days before I gave birth. I've got pictures of myself doing and doing the flips, every day.
These pictures are on our website if you
yeah.
want to have a look.
Yeah, and I don't know who took those pictures, but...
No, I took the pictures.
You took them.
Somebody gave me a camera and we took about 10 pictures.
And it was insane. So when people write to me, oh, can you give me advices about pregnancy? I'm like, don't ask me. It was too crazy, who wants to do these postures when you're 9 months pregnant? But I guess I could do it, and I felt good. It was no problem with me.
As Saraswati said, Joanne was very, very special.
Or crazy.
Or crazy, or special. She had a special practice, a determination, like who's going to spend an hour on their head every day? This takes someone very special to be able to do that, somebody very dedicated and stubborn. But that strength is there, and she had it. So that's how Saraswati put it. So it's not everybody, it's not for everybody, but somebody like that, it worked.
Mm. And then that's it, after birth, Guruji went to America, so I had 3 months off. And after that, practice kept on going with more and more and more postures. My dreaded postures was the Gandhavarindasana. That was like the ultimate for me. I think I fainted a few times in that posture. I didn't like that one. But otherwise, everything was going very well. And as I was saying about the menstruation, Guruji was very strict about that. Of course, it's the culture in India, People in the village, they would even move out of their house during that 3 days of the month. Or Saraswati, I remember, she used to
come to our place.
Come to our house to take bath. And in the West, naturally, people don't respect that. But I think it's a very good thing to respect the 3-day flow of, because it's a downward energy, and I think it's better to not to practice during those days. It keeps you more in tune with your body and not so intense on the practice. And
I remember one time your menstruation started right after practice.
Mine?
Yeah. Oh. So she counted that as 1 day.
Oh yeah.
And when she came back, the third day, Guru said, no, you have to take 1 more day.
That was 3 days.
So I would just change it a little bit. I just want to give you an idea of some of the teachings of Guruji. One of them was that I remember I wanted to I wanted to kill myself, basically. I didn't know I wanted to kill myself, but I was doing things that just to try and get deeper. So I remember doing the double dip and upward facing dog. So let's see if we can work this out in the microphone, but it's very simple. You just come up to upward facing dog and then do a double dip. So I used to do that just so I'd get more loose in the back, get more flexible. And Guruji just watched me. And then one day I didn't do it. And he goes, good. That was the teachings. It's pretty amazing when you think of how Guruji was teaching. He would just watch things and then not say anything. And then finally you do the right way, good. And so it was a very good way to do it. So this conversation came up last night in our gathering we had last night. And it was something that happened. Joanne complained about problems with her nose, and sinuses. And so Guruji decided to give her Sutra Neti. So this is what a Sutra Neti looks like. I have a ghee or wax on the end of it, and this is like a Brahmin thread, and you put this in your nose, pull it out your mouth, and basically dental floss your nose. And his was a little different. He had a rubber tube, and a lot of people just use cathode tubes. And so he was going to do Joanne, and so he did her, but if he's going to do anything to Joanne, he's going to do it to me as well. So we go there, I think again it was a Saturday morning,
Yes,
and
Saturday.
He did it. The thing is, he only had one. So he did Joanne,
And I bled.
and her nose bled. And then he just, there's a tap there, and he rinsed it out. It's Joanne, it's fine, you know, we're married already. So he does it to me as well. And then a few weeks later, because it's a big thing, a new thing for him, I guess, this is when Brad, Pistachio came, Prem was there, Cheryl, and Gary Sherry, and Gary Lopadopa. So they're there. And I don't know if they weren't there for this. Yeah. So he invites us all in to do the Netra Soup. So of course, Joanne and I know what's going to happen, and we know how many he has. So Joanne's right in the front, and I'm right behind her. These guys didn't know. So then it comes out one. I know, Joanne did hers, then it's me, then it's Gary Lopadopa, and apparently it went up one nose and came out the other nose. It got stuck in there, he couldn't get it down. Tried a few times. And so we all went through this process, but every time it was just that one
Cold water, just cold
rinsing
water.
them. You can't put these in hot water anyway. The
But he had a
the
tube.
wax,
It was a tube.
it was a tube, but the wax would melt anyway. So I think Prem was telling me I went home and put, what did you put on there? Tea tree oil or something? And then the next day, Brad's making his own. So you quickly learn how to make them. Which brings me another story with you.
Yes,
A
Prem.
great story.
Never
Here I am
forgot you about
with my
that.
knee. And of course, everybody in the yoga world, in the Ashtanga world, knew about pain, knee problems. So they'd come up with some simple remedies or things to help. And one of them was this gel that they used to put on racehorses. The gel on the racehorse.
Never forgive you, Darby. Never forgive
And
you.
then to make this gel work even better, let's put some cayenne pepper in there. And just put a little bit of cayenne pepper on there. So Prem comes to our house and, okay, let's see if it's going to help. Put it on. Within a couple of minutes, the cayenne pepper starts to work in. And it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And I'm going, what? And I've got my knee under the tap. I'm trying to wash it off. It's not going off. So insane.
But it was very interesting when you guys came along. Like we were most of the time just us two in the class. So when you arrived, as wow, big excitement, and you arrived with all these massage. I think is it David that showed us all the yoga chikitsa.
Comfy leg gel. Is that what it was? Yeah.
Okay, but it was like the back walks and the
Back
cracks
walks,
and the
it's,
neck crack, and so we learned all that from you guys, and every day was
Roger
like
Lewis is the one who started teaching us how to do all this chiropractic stuff. Yeah, well, Brad was doing it. And then Roger Lewis started to show me because he was there left alone and he wanted someone to do it to him, so he taught me so I could do it on him. Yeah, so that was the way it's kind of spread as well, this walking on people's backs and cracking them. So.
So it's time for the
Where were you?
David Williams, he's the one, I thought it was the one which it was.
He
in
was
his
doing
time,
it, but
yeah.
we learned it from Roger
Okay,
Lewis.
okay. Yeah, but maybe didn't teach us. So after all this, we had to go to Australia or something. We wanted to go.
Yeah,
to
after a couple of
Australia.
years, we ran out of money, so we went to Australia.
And by then,
oh,
Shankara
another-
was a little.
Another thing had happened in that time, which was a pretty neat thing to read. It was, those days there was no internet. We used to write letters. So I was writing letters to my mother, and when she died, she'd kept all my letters. So I started to read them, and there was one of them, I'm reading it, and it says, we want to stay here. We want to stay here. We've got to stay with this. We've got this teacher, and he's so good. But he's so old, he might die any time. So we have to stay.
Same
You see, he was
as-
65.
same thing.
Just amazing, amazing man. So I remember that. I think a lot of my letters were that, I'm running out of money, please send money. So. Yes.
How did you guys manage? You have kids, so
At that stage we only had one, and like I said, India those days was very, very cheap to live. And we weren't. We were living in our 200 rupee house.
That's a few dollars.
And living on buying food. We weren't spending any, we were just buying enough food, cooking for ourselves. It was very, very cheap. The biggest expense was Patabi Joyce, the instructions.
Well, I had money when I left Canada, so my mother was sending me money
And,
whenever I needed it
and
on
those
my side.
days,
And
the interest rate was like 15%. So you had money in the bank, it actually grew and grew. So it took a long time to go down. So we ended up going to Australia, and the first thing I did was I got in touch with the Yoga Association there. And I'd been, Matabi Joyce had actually given me his blessings to teach. I don't think he knew what he was doing. I couldn't teach. But the only thing, because the only teaching I knew, the only thing about yoga I knew was Patabi Joyce. And the only teachings I knew was the way he taught me, and was the pulling and the pushing. And in actual fact, I was very fortunate that he was going to take a trip, one of his trips to America. He had actually asked me to look after Vishala. And I think he did this to Norman Allen. He told me Norman Allen. So he'd asked me to look after it while he went away. And I did it for a few days, but I was an Indian instructor as well. And there wasn't that many students, so I was kind of sitting there getting bored. And then Joanne wanted to go somewhere, so we ended up by leaving. And so that was really the only thing. And I remember assisting Guruji. He asked me to come in. And I remember going to an adjust in India in Upavista Connor Center, and I got on his back to push him down. And Guruji goes, no. So he was teaching the Indians very different to the way he taught us. You know, we were crazy. We just accepted whatever he did and just let him do it. Whereas the Indians couldn't do that. And they were also working. They had other things to do in their life other than just yoga. So it was a different approach. And I didn't pick up on that. You know, I just went to Australia, got in touch with the association, and they were having a meeting on that Sunday. And so they invited us and said, come and do a demonstration. And we'd been with Guruji for 2 years. And this time we were learning, we'd done primary, intermediate, and an advanced series, which was an advanced series that nobody else had. He just gave us a special series. And we were doing that every day. And that was our practice, primary, intermediate, and an advanced series. And for me, it was a 3.5-hour practice. And Joanne, it was 4.5, because of course, 1 hour on the head. So we were, you know, and I didn't even realize it. I didn't know how the only references I had were David Williams coming, Brad Ramsey, Prem, and people coming in. And in those days, there wasn't that many beginners. People were more advanced. So for me, it was normal to be doing this type of yoga. And so I didn't realize how advanced we were. So when we gave a demonstration, we kind of blew the audience away, and they went and got in contact with this other guy. His name was Shandor Rameti. I don't know if anybody's heard of Shandor Rameti. Ever heard of him?
Shadow yoga.
Just shadow
called
yoga.
Shadow yoga.
So he was the big name in Adelaide, Australia, where I was. And so he hooked up with me and we practiced together a few times and exchanged a few ideas. And then he was going to go to India to study with Iyengar. So he asked me, look after my school. So, great. So I start looking after his school. There's 30 students. It's really great, 30 students. 1 month later he comes back. There's 4. Because all I knew was exhale. And I remember one lady was going into Mauritius D, and she, I don't want to do this, I don't want to, shh, just exhale. I never saw her again. So, but the guys that stayed, the people who stayed, got really good. So that was my first experience with teaching. And then we spent that year in Australia, and all our focus was getting back to India, getting back to study with Darby Joyce. So we just scraped up everything we did. We just put in the bank, saved up enough money, and we went back. And we also had to go back before Shankara's 2nd birthday. So that kind of speeded things up, which was maybe a good thing, maybe a bad thing, because what it meant was I didn't stay in Australia long enough to get an Australian passport, because I was travelling on a British passport. And so I never stayed there long enough, and then after that they changed the rules and I couldn't go back as a resident, which is, as I said, a blessing in a way, but now I'm living in Canada and have a wonderful life, so things evolved from that. So we went back to India, and one of the things that had happened in this year was in my practice that I was very, very strong. And after being with Guruji, the pains were disappearing and I was very flexible. And I read Light on Yoga, and Iyengar was talking about doing arm balance. And after arm balance, he would drop into a back bend and then stand up. So I said, oh, that sounds good. And in those days, as David will attest, we used to play around and find the easiest way to get into postures, just jump into them, or lift a handstand, all these things we were doing, just playing around with the vinyasa. So I decided, okay, let's try that. And then I'm in back bend, and I said, I've got to get the chaturanga. So I just flipped back up the handstand. So and then drop into chaturanga, do the upward dog, and then do the next one. And that was pretty cool. So then in the end, as I said, we started to lift up the handstand. So then I was lifting up the handstand between every posture. And then dropping into a back bend, flipping back up to handstand, chaturanga, upward dog, next posture, next vinyasa. So every posture was like this. And then, so I go back to India and I'm so proud. And I start doing this in the class. And I remember what was happening was that because we had Shankara, Joanne was in the morning class, I had to go to the afternoon class. I was just with all the Indians. And I remember after, I did it for 2 days, the 3rd day, Guruji said, no, you don't do. So I'm, what? This is so cool. I can't do this. So I didn't do it and just did my practice. Then Guruji again took another trip to America and we went to Goa. And the first thing I do, back to handstands, flips. A few days later, snap, herniated disc. So here I am, I can't even move. Can't bend forward at all. I remember we were in Goa, and later we went back to Gokana, and I remember we were basically camping almost in a jungle. We had a mud hut, and everything was done on the ground, our stove. And I remember just trying to get down, like this. Just get down and get a pipe to start the fire, and then do the same thing to get up. And it was pretty insane. Even the natives were looking at me, you really have a sore back. And just before Guruji came back, I started doing the practice again. And it was fine, it was really good. And we went back to Mysore, and it was like nothing had ever happened. So it healed up that way. And so reflecting on this, and I'll just bring a little bit of teaching into it, reflecting on this, and people I've known who've herniated this, who continue to want to practice. They want to keep going and going. It does take them much more longer to heal. And I just took complete rest for less than 2 months, and it was healed, except there's still scar tissue. So I still, if I don't keep alignment and I do something like a jerking motion, that area will just an electric shock. So just be aware. So that happened. So don't do that. Don't hurt yourself. And then
That was.
and then we decided,
or Saraswati,
Saraswati
put
decided,
in Darby's head.
but Shankar was lonely. Shankar needed someone to play, and he was a pain in the butt. You know, his name Shankar means giver of peace, and he's given me a piece of hell for years. So he was just intense. He wanted attention, attention, attention. I remember we were in Australia, we were swimming, and we could never swim alone. So Joanne would swim, she'd come in, I'd swim. And finally one day we said, just sit on the beach. You know, he's like a year and a half old. And we both went into water.
They're not far.
Not very far, but it's up to our waist. He walks out and walks underwater, walking to get to us. He just keeps walking, he's underwater. Leave us alone, kid. So he was like this all the time. So Saraswati then just puts into my mind, you should have a second child. So we kind of worked out when we knew, we just looked at the calendar and said, okay, tonight's the night. And lo and behold, that was the night.
And then, even when I told Guruji a month later I'm pregnant, he says, oh, you keep practicing. He didn't tell me to stop or anything. So that things that I read sometimes that women should stop practicing when they first 3 months of their pregnancy is like, doesn't make kind of sense to me, because if you've been practicing for years, why would you stop practicing suddenly? So anyway, he kept me practicing, and I was doing an intense practice in those days, those 4.5 hours out, it was intense. And I kept going till we had to leave. My mother, when I told her, I wrote her a letter saying I'm pregnant again. She says, are you nuts? You're coming home. So she said, I'm not sending you any more money. You just, I buy you a plane ticket and you come home. But I was very stubborn. I didn't want to go back. I wanted my second son or daughter to be born in India again. So we were out of money, kind of. And we decided to go again.
We couldn't afford to pay.
Yeah, we couldn't afford to pay after 5. I was 5 months pregnant, so now I knew the routine, what to do after then. And Darby's favorite place was Gokarna, and Shivaratri was coming again. So he said, let's go and live on the beach, on the mud hut.
In the jungle.
In the jungle, and have a baby there. I said, okay, that sounds quite adventure. That's what you call adventure. And
that's what you call having faith. And
yeah, exactly. So
she was just pregnant. That's all. She
wasn't
all, sick.
Yeah, I know, but I had so much faith. I guess Gokarna is one of those places that you just have faith that Shiva is looking after you, and nothing could go wrong.
And this was a little different to the first birth. The first birth, Joanne went to a clinic.
A clinic. I was Saraswati's doctor I had, and she was, in fact, Saraswati's doctor told me, you stop everything, no yoga, nothing, when at 4 months pregnant. And I said, what does she think? You know, I'm a Westerner, that we don't think like Indian, because in India they don't do anything when they get pregnant. So I kept practicing anyway, and when I gave birth, she says, wow, this is like a Sputnik, you know, like the baby came out so quickly. And Guruji came, I think, the next day to make sure that the baby was normal, you know, so...
It came the same day. It came the same day. And Saraswati was there.
Probably wanted to say, okay, is that baby okay or not? So
Saraswati sat with me outside the room. So
yeah, they
wouldn't let me in.
Yeah, they were there during when I had the contractions, and Amma and Saraswati were looking after me. So it was a great adventure to be near the family, and they were looking after us very nicely. So in Gokarna, that's...
Gokarna was another story.
Oh, yeah. So, but it was beautiful. It was like here, no nature, complete in the nature, no neighbors, nothing, just rice paddies and the ocean in front. So that was like quite intense, and we were doing our practice every day outdoors.
I built a nice mud place, probably a little wider than this, but as long as this, and a couple more of these wide. And I totally made it out of mud and polished it, so it was a very hard floor. And Joanne, of course, put cow dung on it every day.
No, at the beginning, not at the end. And
It's the way you kept the flies away. It was kind
yeah, it
of
was
cow dung.
very
was
rustic, very minimum. And in those places, the birth death is quite high. So I was a bit, not crazy, but a little bit intense to give birth in a place like that. But again, as I told you, I had so much faith that nothing wrong could happen. And in fact, it was one of the most beautiful births someone could have, because when I had my contraction, I was in the ocean, and I told Darby, whoops, get the
right
villager
at sunset.
Yeah.
At sunset.
And so the villager ran to the town, because Darby, it was like 2 kilometers away from
3 kilometers.
3 kilometers. So you had to run to the town to get the midwife and bring her back. So by the time all this was happening,
I had time to cook dinner. Joanne's laying on the veranda in cramps, and I'm cooking dinner. Dinner, cooking.
And at one stage,
That
I
was over water.
don't know why, little flies came out of the wood, like
Wasn't flies,
mud.
it was ants.
Ants or mud?
Ants,
Oh,
flying ants. They were just hatching.
By the
millions of them, millions. Just flew out of.
Thousands, yeah.
They just-
They all flew outside, and that attracted hundreds of birds, huh?
Yeah,
There
birds
was
were just
birds flying everywhere. So
feeding on all these things. It was
I
amazing.
said, wow, this is, I forgot about all my contraction, my pain, nothing. I didn't feel anything. I was just like observing all this beautiful scenery. And by the time the midwife arrived, I was ready to give birth already. It was
I'd
like
already
within 2, he took all the boiling water. There
I
was
made a
nothing
cup of
left.
tea. I just made a cup of tea. There's no more water there. And we had to go to a well to get water.
She says, I need boiling water. And he was like, huh? And then after the birth, when the baby cry came out, people started to tam-tams in the village. And then I could hear all along the valley that they were, so it was a very beautiful birth. And it was Shivaratri, so people from around the world were coming, Westerners, and heard there was somebody gave birth in the Kudli beach, which was beautiful beach. And they all brought little presents, like honey from
jam,
Greece.
Honey and jam, which were just total luxuries for us. We hadn't seen it for months. So, wow.
So I felt that Shiva really gave us like presents from, having faith in him, and then making sure that everything went well. And then I think we went to Canada after that.
Yep. After Shivaratri, we went, and that was it. It was time to go back. And then the whole total world changed.
Ugh. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was the,
I had no faith that I could teach yoga after what had happened in Australia. So I wasn't very confident. And in fact, my way, I tried to contact the people who anybody was doing yoga in Canada, and it just fell through. I just couldn't meet anybody.
well, it was mostly Shivananda at that time. And then Shivananda were not very much into the Hatha yoga scene. And it was hardly anybody interested in yoga. You would talk to yoga, it was like unknown, almost. So,
So they just thought I wanted to show off. And so I didn't really get any vibes to join. And of course, we had no money. And the first day we were there, we had to go shopping for food. We went shopping with Joanne's sister, and come to the cash, can you lend me $20 to pay for it? So they realized we didn't have any money. And he was a president of a dress
my
company.
brother-in-law, yeah.
Her husband was a president. So the next day, I'm working. I'm in this company, working in the stock room, shipping room, working. And so I'm working here, and in my mind, I'm still have a kind of a little bit of something I wanted. It was a desire I wanted. I wanted to make money, and I could see that, okay, I'm in this company, I know the president, and maybe if I worked, I can get, I had this little desire I wanted to get up and make some money. And it wasn't through yoga, it was just working in business. So the connection was there, and also the yoga was there. So I was doing yoga, I was very strong, very quick to learn, so I learned very quickly. And so whenever a position came up, I would get the job. You know, if I was ready for it, then I was there. And so this happened. But unfortunately, it was a dress company. They work under stress and work many hours a day. So instead of working an 8-hour day, it was a 10-hour day, 12-hour days. So I was coming home tired, and so I was doing less yoga and less yoga and less. And eventually the yoga disappeared, and I was just working, and then I started playing golf because it was business. And then snowboarding, and I'd do a little yoga to get fit for snowboarding or whatever it was to do that. So it gradually disappeared. And after many years, I realized it had gone, and again, this gentleman, Shandor Rameti, he got hold of me. Somehow he got my phone number and he called me and reminded me of what I was doing in yoga when I was in Australia, what he had seen. And he was kind of like so sad that I had stopped because of what he had seen. And so he planted the seed again where I wanted to come back to yoga. So it was like, oh God, I remember what I've missed, what has happened. But I couldn't get out of a situation because now we had a mortgage,
2 children.
2 children. Was it 2? By then 3 children.
By then 3, because
children.
I had another one.
And so I could never get out of this situation. You can't, and in Canada you cannot quit your job. You quit, you've got nothing. You have to get fired. And then you get unemployment. And, you know, working for him, even if I quit, I couldn't get a job paying the same money. I had a car, all these great benefits, bonuses all the time. So I couldn't get out of it. And yet I'm praying to Shiva, what can I do? And the next thing that happened was my brother was the president, but he wanted to become the owner. He wanted to be part owners, equal, because he'd built the company up. And the owner didn't want. So they started to have fights together. And so the decision was it would break up. And I was the catalyst. I got fired, which let my brother-in-law know that it was all over. So I'm the first one. I get fired. Then the whole family and anybody had with him got fired, which meant 6 months severance pay. They gave me 6 months full pay, benefits. And then unemployment started. So I had a year and a half. I'm going home after being fired because somebody was using the car, so I didn't have a car. I had to walk home, it was like 3 kilometers. And I'm going, oh shit, I'm fired. Yes, 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 yes. So both of these feelings are there. And by the time we get home, I'm so determined that it's happened, and I'm not even going to think about going back. But Joanne's saying, you've got to beg for your job back. And no. Next morning, I started the practice. And in fact, Joanne started as well. We both got into it. And bang, we just
That was
every day
non-stop.
again, back non-stop, practice. And then I started thinking about teaching. It was a summer, so the studio, which in a lot of places the studios closed in the summer, they closed, so I was able to use their space to do the Mysore program. So I started doing the Mysore program, and not many students, 1 student, and 2, and 1. One would come, 1 would leave, and the second one would come, which was the worst way to work. You'd have 1 and then another private. So those things happened. And gradually it built up, and Ashtanga and yoga was just getting popular, especially Ashtanga. So the word spread. That was a guy that knew Ashtanga. And so people started to come.
That was in 1997, 98.
97, 98.
That's the year Amma died, I think 97.
Yeah.
She died, and we sort of connected with Guruji at that time.
Then we finally, because I'd never contacted Guruji within 14-year period. I wasn't, not that I didn't like Guruji, it's just that I wasn't proud of myself for stopping the yoga practice. So I didn't want to let him know. I didn't want to say, Guruji, how are you? But I'm not practicing yoga anymore. So I just didn't say anything. And then when Amma died, we wrote him a letter and got in contact with him. And he was very happy. And we actually sent him the photos of when you were 2 days pregnant, he was assisting, and he was really started to show them around the shower. So I started the practice of yoga again, and then started to teach. And after about a year, next thing I know, there's all these people who want to learn it, and the studio invites me to teach. And I've never taught. I've only taught Mysore style. So I had 30 people in front of me, and they wanted lead class. So that was how I started teaching lead classes. And then it just very quickly progressed. That I did that for a year, then I opened a studio, then opened another studio, a small, bigger space. And
then in year 2000, we went to see Guruji in New York.
in New York.
we hadn't seen him for 15 years. It was like for us such a big event, and he was at the Puck building. It was huge place, like 250 place, I think there
People
was.
there,
And
yeah.
people there. It was like unbelievable. We were so impressed. I mean, we were used to 2 people or 8 in a class, and suddenly there's hundreds of people coming to visit, to practice with him. So we had a meeting personally when we arrived, because we asked Eddie to allow us to say hi, visit him. And I was so impressed. I mean, he was 85 years old, and he hadn't changed hardly anything. And he was as strong as before. He had as much energy as before. And, you know, we were so, I said, how is this possible? An 85-year-old man, us who thought he would be dying at 65, you know, could you know, samastitihi in front of 250 people, not even a microphone, I think he could. I don't know. He was just unbelievable. So that was a big trigger for, and he says, you come to Mysore, and like,
Well, no, first they asked him to be certified.
not certified,
No,
authorized.
I asked him to be certified.
Oh,
And he said, no, but I will authorize you. So, because he said, okay, I want to see your practice first. So he saw us practice, and then he said, okay, I'll authorize you. And we said, what about certification? He said, you come to India. And there's no way, we didn't have any money to go to
and
India.
3 kids,
And
3
3
child,
kids, so-
yeah.
And he said, you come. So we just put it in our minds to come, and things happened, and the money came. And so we went to India, and then he certified us. And it was a big change. Like, we came to India, and there's Lakshmi Puram, a room that was very crowded with 8 people. We thought 8 people was too many in that room. And now there was 12. And there's lines of people going up the stairs. So he gives us a starting time, it's 9 o'clock. So we come in 9 o'clock, we're the last ones to practice, and we do our practice. And at the end of the class, we say, Guruji, how does this work? How does the system work? He said, oh, first batch fixed. First batch fixed. After that, queuing system. I said, oh, okay, so we'll get in the queue. So we come the next morning really early on the queue. You know, not 9 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning.
At 4 o'clock.
And the people there are saying, what?
Who are they?
Who are you guys? You know this is people have been waiting for lunch? Yeah, it's fine. We'll get in the queue, there's nobody here, we're in the line now. So we do the class, and I think then they saw us practice and they kind of said, okay. And then we were established on the second batch. Not knowing even at that stage that we'd actually jumped from the last batch to the second batch. And it's always been like that for me. Every time we went to Mysore, Joanne was there, so I always just joined in. And it was upsetting for one girl. One girl was being there and she was leaving. She was going to leave and she'd been waiting to get into the first batch. And somebody left and it was her turn. And she's ready to go in and she says, Darby. So I ended up getting in before her. So she was really upset.
So it was very interesting for us to, you know, from 2001, then they moved to Gokulam in 2002. And we were there for that transition from 12 people to having no lead class ever, to moving to Gokulam and overnight almost having one Friday lead morning primary lead class, and with what was 50 to 70 people in the room. So it was for us like such a big change in the system, you know. And when I arrived, we were supposed to stay there for 3 months only. We had our plane tickets, and I had to quit my job because my boss says, you're not taking 3 months off. I said, well, I'm taking 3 months off. And he says, you cannot. I said, I'm quitting. So that was it for my job, another one of those unemployable. And, and after 3 months, I didn't want to go back home. And Shankara, our oldest son, was like as if he found his home. He was like in heaven in Mysore. He didn't want to go back. And there was kids of his age like Matt and all these people that Kino was there also. So they were like just making a team of the new generation going there. So I said, okay, I'll stay and Shankara can stay.
And Derek.
My youngest son says, well, I need to go to school. I said, no problem, I'll find you a school anywhere. So I got him into Indian schooling.
Was it Palu and
Oh, I don't know the...
She had her two kids going to school.
Oh, yeah, my Monica. So
No, it wasn't Monica.
it didn't... so we got organized very quickly, and I stayed, and Darby had to go back home to the school and
Yeah,
traveling back and forth afterwards, and
so I was going back to India twice a year, and Joanne was coming to Canada once a year.
So it was a big, those 5 years were a lot of traveling back and forth, but it was like a great time to be there again. Even if the more and more people were coming, it was always a pleasure to be, great to be there and practice with Guruji.
And in that period, we invited Guruji to come
To Montreal in 2002.
and we were very blessed that he accepted, under the condition that he went to Niagara Falls. Well, Saraswati wanted to go to Niagara Falls. She thought it was very close to Montreal. It's like a 7-hour drive. So they came, we picked them up in Toronto, stayed with Kelly Steele that night, I think. Kelly Steele's house. Then we went to Niagara Falls and we came back, and I dropped them off at the train, and I'm in a car. So here I am in the car racing the train to get back to Montreal so I could pick them up in Montreal. So it's pretty speedy. Just boom, okay, I'm off. And I made it. I just got off the train and I picked them up. And then he did this wonderful workshop in Montreal.
Yeah, but it was quite, it was intense, because there was not only Guruji, it was Guruji Sharat, his wife, Saraswati, is her husband, Sharat's baby.
Sharat's baby, Joseph.
Joseph,
Sharat's
Dominic,
wife, yeah.
Corigliano.
Yeah, Dominic.
So that was 8 people to find a place to stay and all this. So it was an intense time. They used to travel like this as a big family. It was great in a sense, but it was.
Never been sick in my life until that time.
Yeah.
Ended up with an asthma attack. Ended up in hospital. So
It
pretty
was
sick.
so tense.
Yes.
What about your children? Was it easy or very natural for them to find the path of yoga, or is this a different generation, or did one of them?
Well, Shankara was, he had lived almost 4 years of his life in India, so for him it was like, it was very natural to do yoga. In fact, he was in university in engineering, and when he came to Mysore with me and us, he said, forget the university, I'm not, he knew that's what he wanted to do. And of course, when he came back to Montreal, he started to help.
He's very unemployable.
Yes, he's very unemployable.
But he's a very brilliant practitioner, not just in asana, but also in the other methods and searching. He's really searching, and I'm learning a lot of things from him.
But what was kind of scary is, like, I don't know about this new method, but to intermediate, you have to go, do back then, and come back on your own, which for us was totally unheard of. We even learned, I think, this slip when we were into advanced postures. It was
I
not.
think we didn't even learn Urdhva Dhanurasana until we were into 3rd series. So we didn't even do the back bend, let alone stand up from it. So
So I remember him in the old Shala. He was still there when the Lakshmipuram Shala. I mean, he had his feet like this. It was like anything, he had strong legs, but he didn't have that kind of flexibility to lift himself up. And he did anything he could to get up there. And Matt was the same, and all those kids were trying to get up from just so they could learn intermediate. And from that, Shankara was, when he came back to Montreal, he came back a year later and was teaching his girlfriend, and she was very flexible, and all these back bend and all this, and was very strict like Guruji, and suddenly her too, she ended up with her herniated disc. So you learned very quickly that this practice is very dangerous. And if you're not careful and you don't know what you're teaching, or you don't have that experience, you can hurt your students, and you can hurt. So you had to go through a lot of learning with Iyengar people, with other techniques to protect people from getting hurt, and we learned a lot that way. Because our Siri was a little bit different than now.
Yeah.
There's a few things like we've learned And our famous advanced postures were different because Guruji would take us individually. You would not look at it was not a series. You would be, in fact, I asked him when I went back in 2001 and I said, Guruji, why do my advanced series is different to this advanced series? He says, oh, then it was not correct, now correct series. So that was always his answer about asking things like that.
And we used to always get the same postures. So whatever he gave Joanne, he gave me. And so it was more to do with flexibility. Whenever Joanne got pregnant, it changed for me. She got more meditation, and I got arm balance. So I was in more arm balance. I remember the last posture he gave me was leg behind the head handstand. So it was the last thing he gave me. I remember in the Charlotte walking around all the mats in the small Charlotte, just hand on my hands walking around, one arm handstands. So a lot of that stuff was there when she got pregnant. But the first time she got pregnant, she ended up getting all the postures I got anyway. So you ended up getting them. But the second time we never went back. So it was pretty amazing. So where were we?
When we in Mysore in 2001, or
Yeah, it was very interesting to see that many people, as Joanne said. At times it was just for months on end. It was just Joanne and myself.
oh, you mean in the 2000 and the 1970s?
And quite often, it was just me and Joanne practicing. And it was amazing. He would just sit. He would sit there for 3.5 hours. Maybe he'd go out for a cup of coffee. And he would sit in his chair, and you might have seen pictures of Guruji sleep on his chair. So he'd do that. And I'd be doing my practice going, oh, maybe I can get through this posture. And because he would adjust me, maybe I can get through this, and he won't adjust me today. He always woke up. Always. So it was pretty, never got away with anything. So eventually what happened?
Well, Guruji got sick.
Yeah.
I stayed there till 2006. And basically, he got sick basically 2 months after I left. And after that, we went to see him, but he was not so well. And we don't return very often, but it was a great time.
It was a great, I remember we were in Crete when we heard that he died. So and it was very sad. And we couldn't go. We were teaching a workshop, and plus we would have to get to Athens to get a visa. And so we didn't go for another couple of years, I think. But finally we went back just to pay our respects. So.
Yeah, it was very interesting. When I arrived in 2001, we had sometime in connection for a little conference, not like after in Gokulam, but few 10 people, 12 people would come sometime. And he would read his newspaper, and people were talking. And one girl asked me, she said, oh, how long are you staying here? I said, well, I don't know. Visa problem and money issues. And he said, oh. Then he put down his newspaper. Says, no visa problem, no money problem. I'm like, what is he talking about? And so I let it be. Not long after, my aunt died, and I received an inheritance. And that allowed me to stay there without going on a budget. Darby's
sending all my money.
I said, wow, there's the money problem fixed. I said, now the visa, and I go home, and I asked for a visa, and they say, I explained the situation. My son was at school, and I needed a long-term visa, 1 year minimum, so I don't have to get out of the country all the time. And the lady was there, says, why bother? Take 5 years. So she gave me a 5-year visa, like that, just like overnight, like that. I was there, and I'm like, I couldn't believe it. Everybody else had problem with visas. So sometimes you wonder if Guruji didn't have that third sense, and he probably felt that I would manage to stay there, and I stayed there the whole 5 years almost. And, we had those sometime insights, I guess, or yeah, for us it was sometime when I remember of Mysore for me is like always sunny somehow, and I say, it's funny because Guruji was there and he was like the son that gave us so much strength, and also he had that strength to make us go carry on about everything, not only asanas but also other things in life. And he gave us also the happiness because we all loved him, so we were happy there, and he gave us guidance. So I'm very thankful that I spent so many years with him. Basically, almost 10 years that I spent in Mysore.
It was, as I said at the beginning, it was a turning point in my life meeting this man. And it was a very sad day when we knew he had passed. And it was sadder before then because we also knew that he was sick, and we watched him being sick after he was 90, after his 90th birthday. But I was still remembering him coming down and wanting to teach. He was in the back, you could see him in the back room. They wouldn't let him come into Vishala because it was too hot and sweaty and it was affecting him. But he was sitting in the back room and he was like watching and looking and just moving his body. I remember one time it was in the old Shala, but his instruction to me was, I was doing something and he just looked at me and went, So he didn't have to even come over. His instructions came. So he just, his life was teaching. And his love of teaching was there, and he just couldn't, it was so heartbreaking for us, and I think for him as well, but he couldn't teach it at the end, and he just wanted to have people around. And, we talk about Guruji and his love of money. You give him these bills and he would count them, and finally I think David Swenson bought him a machine, and he would just, correct, you can come. And he would wave it at you. But he also had this ability that when he finished teaching the hundreds of Westerners, he would get in the car and go back to Lakshmipuram and spend another couple of hours teaching a few Indians for very little money. So it just wasn't the money that he was out. He just wanted to teach, and he had this love of teaching, and he had this gift that he could make everybody feel special. I remember somebody said, I'm so special with Guruji, and I said, everybody. He makes everybody feel special. He had this very special gift. So we're very, very blessed to have had this man come onto the planet and pass this knowledge of yoga to us all. So I'm just so grateful.